Ghost Stories. Do all sorts of ghostly things. Talk local legends. And some ghost hunting. Stories we hope to live to tell. And you live to listen. Huz Ghost Stories. Huz Ghost Stories. We talk Tinker's Hollow to the beast of Delaware Road. Stories we hope to live to tell. And you live to listen. Huz Ghost Stories. Huz Ghost Stories.
Welcome, folks, to another episode of Huz Ghost Stories. I am the Reiki Master and Medium, Andrew Huzar. With me is cryptid expert Professor Alex Wheaton, and of course, from across the pond, our everyday normal guy, Captain Tyler.
Just down the lake a ways.
Just down the lake a ways. Hopefully you enjoyed the last episode, The Bus to Nowhere. It was a blast to record, and I think we're still riding on the highs from it. We're going to have a very different episode this time around. Make sure you're liking, subscribing, commenting, checking out every video. If you love somebody, share us with them. If you hate somebody, share us with them. We can be annoying if you want us to be. Just let us know ahead of time. We're here for you. That's why we do this.
We can make exclusively terrible content.
We can make one awful video that you can just keep spamming to people.
Oh, yeah.
As always, use the Linktree link below to check out all the socials and all the merch. Go buy something, or at least contact me about being a producer to help send us to some spooky places.
Mm-hmm.
Not everywhere is free, believe it or not. And I know we act like we're big deals, all three of us, but we're not really big enough where people will just give us entrance to places for free. So, you know.
Wait, we're not a big deal?
I try to throw my clout around, and they're like, I've never heard of you. And I'm like, oh.
Yeah, who are you?
Oh. But then when I say I know Cap and Tyler, they're like, oh. Well,
Yeah, you got to pay double now. Back of the line.
You paid double.
This
And
is
then,
a
of course,
grocery store.
you can use the Ghost Stop and the Paranormality links below as well to get yourself some discounts on cool products. Also, forgot to mention it last episode, so I'll mention it here, and I'll try to throw up a little graphic. Make sure you're checking out Erie All-Star Wrestling. We are a sponsor for them.
Sponsor.
So make sure you're checking them out. General admission tickets are literally $10. Front row and second row, they're more expensive, but I don't sit up there, so I don't remember how much they are. But go check them out. It is always a good time.
Yeah, if you're a local Erie County person, or you like wrestling and you're close enough to the northwestern part of Pennsylvania, come check it out.
It's always a fantastic time, so come check it out. It's always a fun time. But that's enough of the jibber jabber. Let's dive into today's topic, the Congelier House.
Congelier?
The Congelier House in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, stood as a haunting monument to a dark and macabre past. Nestled among the city's bustling streets, This foreboding mansion garnered a reputation as one of the most haunted locations in the United States. Its eerie history, tragic legends, and mysterious demise have fascinated locals and paranormal enthusiasts alike for generations. Built in the late 19th century by Charles Congelier, a wealthy businessman, the Congelier House was initially an opulent residence reflecting the grandeur of its time. However, behind its lavish facade lay a sinister tale that would eventually cement its place in ghostly folklore. The mansion became infamous due to the tragic events that unfolded within its walls. According to the lore, Charles Congelier was involved in an illicit affair with his maid, a young woman named Essie. When Mrs. Congelier discovered their relationship, a violent confrontation ensued, resulting in the gruesome murders of both Charles and Essie by decapitation. Some accounts even claim that Mrs. Congelier herself met a tragic end in the house, driven to madness by jealousy and rage. A friend of the Congeliers stopped by the house a few days later. They discovered Mrs. Congelier rocking in a chair, humming lullabies to Essie's severed head.
The house sat empty for roughly 20 years when a railroad company purchased it. They converted the house into a place for their workers to stay. That didn't last long because the workers complained about a lot of strange phenomena. The house was relisted and sat for another 10 years when Dr. Adolf Brunhichter purchased it in 1900. Doctor was a bit of a recluse with locals noticing they didn't see much of him. Nobody ever really thought about him until the night of August 12th, 1901. Neighbors heard a woman screaming from the doctor's house. As they charged for the front door, there was an explosion of light from inside. Local police found a woman's decapitated body inside. Dr. Brunhichter was nowhere to be found, but upon further investigation, the police found a strange laboratory deep in the house. Inside were the heads of the 5 more women. Notes in the doctor's journals detailed the experiments he was doing, trying to keep the heads alive after death. Oddly enough, Dr. Brunhichter's story might not end there. In 1927, a drunken man was arrested in New York, claiming to be Adolf Brunhichter himself. He talked about the experiments being performed in Pittsburgh and even listed the locations of more bodies. The police searched the locations but didn't find any other bodies. The man was released from prison after being deemed harmless. The man became known as the Pittsburgh Spook Man. Both medium Julia Murray and Thomas Edison visited the house. Julia claimed to have found an entity that was bloodthirsty and capable of great harm. Thomas Edison was rumored to visit the house to test out a device that would let him communicate with the dead. However, there is no record of his visit ever taking place.
The house then sat empty until the late 1920s, when a gas company purchased it. They once again turned it into a living space for their immigrant workers. The workers hated living in the house, though. They complained of all sorts of phenomena, including demonic voices. The worst was when multiple workers were found brutally murdered in the basement. The investigation led nowhere because there was no way for a killer to escape the basement. The workers left, but the gas company itself remained up until the house met its own grisly end. While working to repair a gas leak at a nearby location, an explosion erupted. Whether it was the blast itself or flying debris, nobody is sure, but the house is no longer standing. All that's left is a crater where the Congelier House once stood. Regardless of the cause, the Congelier House was reduced to rubble, yet its haunting legacy endured. The site where the mansion once stood remains a magnet for ghost hunters and thrill seekers, drawn by the allure of encountering the paranormal. The question everyone asks when they leave is, was that the end or just the beginning?
So the question I always want to ask is, the entity Julia Murray sensed was there, was it always there? Or did that come into play during the Congelier's living, or like after she killed her husband?
So you think it's connected to the original family, not to the doctor?
I do. And I because I couldn't find anything on the stupid doctor
Mm-hmm.
beforehand or afterhand.
So it might help to know there was a misspelling on this. Brune Richter.
Oh,
I
Everybody-
totally butchered that pronunciation.
Oh no, it's okay. You were pronouncing it the way it looks. It's supposed to be an R, not an H.
was there
So
anything on Brood Richter?
Mm.
Brune Richter is something that you can find, and it all connects back to the story. So if you don't mind me jumping in a little bit,
No, go ahead.
So both within the general paranormal community and whatnot, this story, this house, they can't agree on if it's real or not.
I think I saw that too because there was another way I saw that the
There-
explosion happened or whatever.
I would say there are several disagreements on if the house ever existed, if the Congelier family ever existed, if the doctor ever existed, if there was ever a train company that bought the house, because they don't have any record of that.
Yeah.
Even in the script, and Tyler talked about it, there's no record of Thomas Edison visiting it, which, if you're trying to find a way to legitimize a fake story, you put something that can't be verified that's fairly enough common knowledge. And if you know anything about Thomas Edison, he did actually create a phone that could supposedly talk to the dead. That's a real thing.
Yeah.
So that's a way to legitimize your story. And the fact that there's nothing left to this day. It's just a piece of blank land. Always encourages people to, make up stories to explain what happened. So, even within the paranormal community, this is not 100% this is a real thing. It's very much they can't decide if this was a real haunting or a real house or just a myth that came out of nowhere. So it makes it really interesting. So yeah, I'm going to tell you right now, I couldn't find any public records of a Adolf Brunrichter. I couldn't even find immigration, and that stuff is fairly public access.
Mhm.
So I couldn't find any legal immigration papers for a Brunrichter that was Adolf. So there's problems there. But yeah, I don't know. It's very interesting.
Yeah. And Dr. Adolf, where I was going, since I couldn't find anything, I couldn't find if he had a morbid history of experiments, if he was some Nazi Germany doctor.
Well, he couldn't
person.
be. It was before.
Right.
But
But if
we
that was
got
the kind of
nothing.
person he was, yeah. So I think the entity would be attached or came into play during Charles and his wife's episode. And I think it just stayed there, especially with the railway people supposedly having theirs, the gas company workers having issues there. I think once it came there, it just stayed there and never left. Tyler, what are your thoughts on the Congeliers here to start?
I don't know. It seems kind of weird, that there's no record on anything. I mean, so how does something like this even just come up?
So there was an old newspaper article, and I think it was the Congeliers. I think I may have actually pulled it up. But one thing people used to talk about it. No, it doesn't say Congelier, I don't think, in the article. But it talks about how the children of Mrs. John Congelier. So they are mentioned in the article. But it's an old article, and it talks about how the house exploded, killing Mrs. Congelier. And like Alex said, though, that there's even people that argue against that, and evidence that argues against that ever happening. So pretty much, I think it all started with there was a house there that blew up somehow. And I think people may have just started swirling with rumors, but like there's so much history there that just come up with on the spot after it blows up is weird.
Yeah, but they give a physical address though.
Yeah, you can go check out the spot.
How does that like? I don't know. I don't know.
Ridge Avenue. There's nothing. It's just a blank lot, and so that's the.
And people that go there, because you can go there, they talk about very bad feelings and stuff there. But like we've talked about before, and Heidi at Judson House even mentioned, if enough people focus on something, they can create that person or that energy, and it can sit there. So if an innocent family just had a gas leak explosion, it's possible all these paranormal people coming in have created an entity that now.
That's a wild backstory, though. Like, that's...
Right?
Oh, for sure.
Like, you've got... Like, what a crazy ghost story. This would be a good one to whip out around a campfire if you want to freak some people out, because you got a lot to go with.
And so here's another thing, too, I see. The first recorded house built at that address was 20 years later after it was supposedly built. It says the late 1880s.
Mm-hmm.
So this is weird.
It is very, very weird. And there's a lot of dots from a lot of places that don't necessarily line up.
Well, even the timeline doesn't add up. Like, the first Congelier family lived there was in the 1920s. And it says the gas company blasted in 1927, but that's even after that Adolf, the Broom Richter doctor, did his experiments and all that other stuff that supposedly happened. In 1927 was the year he was spotted in New York. So the timeline is very, very skewed here.
1860s built.
1860s. And can we talk about Adolf Broom Richter for a moment here, where he disappeared that night after his bodies in laboratory were found, and then nothing ever happened, and then all of a sudden, randomly one night in New York, a drunken guy's walking around of all names calling himself Adolf Broom Richter and talking about all this?
Yeah.
That is wild. Like, and then just to release it was harmless, because they probably just thought it was just some drunk. Nothing checked out. But, like, that would be wild.
Yeah, but I don't know. Yeah, if something made news like that, it's not that crazy to think that some drunken nutbag would be doing that.
I am the Adolf Broom Richter.
Yeah. And then they gave out more addresses, like where bodies were hidden, and then just nothing. I need that happen.
Yeah. The one thing I don't think I saw, so when I saw that he was labeled as the Pittsburgh Spook Man, I don't think I came up with any like other things of him popping up.
No.
Like, it all just came back to tied, like Alex said, to the Congelier House. Which I thought was weird, too, that, like, either Broom Richter or the guy pretending to Broom Richter gained the name Pittsburgh Spookman, but, like, he's not part of anything else.
Right.
Usually, like, we'll see, like, he starts popping up as part of his own things or his own legends now, like, Pigman Road. Pigman's his own thing now.
Right. Yeah.
Spookman, now he's just possibly a doctor that beheaded a bunch of ladies trying to keep them alive.
Yeah.
Or a drunk man that lied about being him.
Mm-hmm. There's been a lot of things that come up that say a place doesn't even exist. That's kind of weird.
There's-
the one. What's that?
it's weird that there's so much arguing over this legend.
Yeah.
Like, we've seen a lot of times where there's different versions of a legend, but like people are coming up
Yeah.
with entirely different backstories and
Sure.
history.
Yeah. There's some sort of like linear connection that's consistent in those ones.
Yeah.
There's really
This
no-
one's just
I'm trying to think of any legends that were like just completely made up out of thin air, and people are like, oh yeah, that's not the thing.
usually most legends have some sort of basis. In fact, there's
That's what I'm
something
saying,
that
right.
started it.
Yeah, right, exactly.
And so like with this one here, like what so much happened. Like there's so it almost reminds me kind of Gutenberg, where there is
That's what I
one
was thinking.
central thing.
Doctor?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then
I was thinking the same exact thing.
like there's one central legend, or there's one central like item or place, like in this place the house, there the cemetery, and
Yeah,
then
there's the
extra
lake.
things get attached to it. Yeah.
Yeah.
And like Gore Orphanage, where there was an orphanage and the orphanage burnt down, but then all these other things got attached to that history. So I wonder if it's kind of something similar, like there was a house that blew up, and then there was the husband that or the wife that murdered her cheating husband. So let's throw that into the Congelier House. If
Yeah,
then
right,
there
yeah.
was a
There's always a doctor too
Oh.
somewhere down the line.
all right. So Tyler, let me throw this out to you here. All right, I'm a pitch this over.
Yep.
See what your thoughts are. Dr. Adolf Brunrichter. All right. In Pittsburgh, he's chopping off ladies' heads, doing experiments, right?
Yeah.
He flees. The next time he's found is somewhere in New York. Could this be the same doctor from Gutenberg that just started going by a different name?
Far-fetched. But didn't that doctor from Gutenberg also... Well, he was an abortion doctor. Kind of a other ends of the spectrum there.
Hey, it's all right if you're experimenting on ladies, though.
That's true. That's true. I don't think so. I think, if anything, it was either really the guy who was just drunk and crazy, and that checks out. Or, I guess 3 things. 2, doesn't exist at all, never happened, fabricated like everything else that seems to be... That the only consistent thing in the story is that everything's fabricated. So, then the third one is that he's just some random guy who heard about what was going on in Pittsburgh. And Pittsburgh and New York, I don't think are terribly far apart. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Especially,
Pittsburgh's just a couple hours south of us, so be within driving range.
yeah, even from where I'm at, New York's 6 hours, so it's not unreasonable to hear about things that was going on 6 hours away. This is 1927. You know what I mean? There's newspaper publishings. There, you know what I mean? Definitely,
Everything was national news.
right? Or even like there's still hear rumors about this and the other. And the third thing is I was just some random guy who was trying to get attention.
Yeah. All very plausible theories here with this one. Alex, you've been doing some searching, so let's toss a ball up over to you. What have you got?
$1129 Ridge Avenue had a house, but it wasn't a mansion.
Yeah, I saw. Yep, I saw that as well. And when was it built?
It in the 1880s.
Yep, 20 years after the supposed house was built.
Owned by Marie Congelier.
All right, so we have a Congelier.
But not Lydia.
Yeah.
Not
The thing,
Charles.
the thing I saw said there wasn't a Congelier family in there till like the 20s.
So, and this is where,
Which is 60 years after.
yes.
A lot of weird things, too. The wife's name changed a lot.
Yeah.
Lydia. I did not see Marie, which is funny that Marie's the factual one.
So,
A lot of different names in there.
the house existed in the 1880s. It was built. The person who had ownership of it, we don't know at that time, but we do know Marie Congelier owned the house, and she died at the age of 28 to a laceration on her neck from a shard of glass. And there's actual newspaper clipping about it. Like, this is not me making it up.
Yeah.
Marie Congelier, 28, 1129 Ridge Avenue, died in Presbyterian Hospital. She is thought to have been passing the scene of an accident on her way to work. That is all that was written in the newspaper. But the official report and everything, she died from blood loss from a laceration from a shard of glass.
Yeah.
So in the 1920s, there was a gas company called Equitable Gas Company that was in the area. And on November 14th, 1927, they did have a tank explosion that killed several people. Just want to point out that this was around the time that Marie Congelier was around, so there is some connection to that. She did have family that survived, and her surviving family did say and said, quote, they tore down, the house was stayed up for a couple more years, but was torn down for the development of the redevelopment of the freeway and the area around it. So the house doesn't exist anymore, but it was torn down for transportation purposes.
Yeah.
A independent researcher, much like we are, tried to look up the history of the story, and the first written record of it is a book, and I want to look up the book, and I haven't looked it up yet. But apparently, the first written account of it is in this Ghost Stories book. And when pressed about it, nobody really has an answer as to where the story came from. It just kind of exists.
Yeah.
And so, in thinking with what we've talked about before, the fact versus fiction, and sometimes the story of it makes it happen.
Yeah.
I don't know. There's a lot to be said about that in this situation.
Yeah. Because there's a lot of details.
Yes.
None of them are vague.
No. And by the way, all these details are consistent.
Yeah.
That's something that should be noted, that I really want to emphasize in our own history of what we've talked about on these podcasts. Like, typically with a legend, there's some details that are changed, and they're not clear, and they tend to be related to some kind of well, I heard it was this, I heard it was this. This story is consistent.
Mm-hmm.
Scary consistent. The person who did the independent investigation into the history of it was from Illinois, and had heard the story and visited Pittsburgh and looked into it, and all the details were the exact same that he heard in Illinois. They're the same details that he found in researching on the internet people had heard in California, in Colorado, in Florida, in Texas. The story is exactly the same. There's no variance. All the details that we talked about are there.
It's so weird that for the first time, there's discrepancies in the history, not the story.
Yeah.
There's a lot of discrepancy in the history.
Which is weird. Usually it's the other way around. Usually the history lines up in a straight, neat, and tidy line, and it's the story that just people change details, add things to. But in this one, the story's always the same. It's always Mrs. Congelier beheading them, Brune Richter moving in, beheading more people. A lot of beheadings.
Published 1979, by the way. I looked it up.
1979?
1979 was when the book Haunted Houses by Richard Weiner and Nancy Osborne was released. And that is the earliest known recorded version of this story. Was in that
What year
book.
was that?
1979.
Mm-hmm.
Where
I
the
don't
hell
know.
did they come up with it?
I don't know, that's why
I really think that it's like a Gore Orphanage Road or Gutenberg kind of thing where like there was like a actual person like Marie Congelier had a tragic death.
and
Nothing really there, but then all these other
it
things
took
got
on
added.
the life of all the other things.
Like maybe in another part of the Pittsburgh area, a woman did murder her husband for having an affair. And all of a sudden, someone changes that to like, oh yeah, that was Marie Congelier.
Yeah.
And then down the road, there is the explosion. Oh, that was the Congelier house because it's gone.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Feels like a lot of different
Well,
things were used to make up a singular.
Yeah, I don't think it's real. I think there's too many holes in all of this.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, having dates helps everything, but it also makes it easier to fact check everything.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And since there's no recorded history, like the house was built 20 years after the story, which right there can just nullify everything.
Yeah.
Second of all, Lydia, whatever the hell her name is, name was actually Marie. If they're even the same person, husband never existed, no trace, and Brune Richter also never existed. And also, like, dude disappeared without a trace and then was seen like years later in New York City. Nah. He disappeared without a trace because he was never real in the first place.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's interesting. I'm definitely looking into buying that book for like $5 that it was published in because I'd be interested. Because that's the person in me. That's the historian in me.
Yeah.
I want to know more about like that.
I mean, it's a fun story.
It's a good ghost story.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It is
a little more historical consistency, though, would be appreciated.
Because there's, like Alex said, there's different articles on the gas tank explosion. Can I make this one? And there's one specific article that I think goes a long way in. Here it is. Let me see if I can screen share this. That go a long way in trying to tie everything into the story. And that I think helped create this whole story. Wait for it to, take its little sweet time to pull up here. All right, I don't know how big it'll pull up for you, Tyler, so I can read the caption since I got it down here.
Oh, I can't.
Blast leaves 5 tots motherless. Here are 5 tots left motherless by the terrible gas tank explosion. They are the children of Mrs. John Congelier of 1129 Ridge Avenue, who was struck by a section of glass blown from the window of her home. An artery in her hip was severed, and she died in the Presbyterian Hospital. The children are, and then it lists their names, Lena, John, Angelo, Rose, and Francis. And that was from 1927. So it's talking about the blast again, and it mentions a Mrs. John Congelier dying.
Which would give us a husband, a John.
Yeah. And
what was this feller's name? It was Charles Wright Congelier.
Yeah, that's
So not consistent, and 60 years after the story was supposed to take place.
it's like a little bit was taken from like each fact to help craft one
Sure.
ghost story. And it is a great ghost story. Like if you told this around a campfire or to a group of friends, it would be fantastic.
Mhm.
But I agree with both Alex and Tyler. And I think that anyone that goes to this area and they do encounter anything bad or negative, I think it's something that's been created by the people going there. Especially part of the story specifically being a medium went there and like sensed basically a demon. If you get enough people going there trying to find a demon, eventually one's either going to be created or one's going to make its home there and be like, all right, you
think
wanted
so?
something. You wanted something here. Yeah, tulpas? Am I
Yeah.
saying that right? Basically, if enough people believe and talk about something enough and enough and enough, it actually creates like that energetic being and leaves it there. So there may have never been anything there, and just people hearing the story over time, going there, looking for this thing, have just created it, and now it is there.
Interesting.
Which is creepy. So all of you
But
people,
who is this medium though? Like, it said she was famous, but
I haven't heard of her. And old mediums like that, it wasn't hard for them to be quote unquote famous.
yeah.
So, I mean, I never heard of her. And again, I don't know if she's a real person or not. She could have just been a medium made up just for the story.
Yeah, just like the made up doctor.
Because, like, it's weird that you would have records of her visit and what she said, but nothing from Thomas Edison going.
Right.
A real person.
Right.
And that's why I said credence to the story. You connect it with a real person who was known to really be doing those types of things, so that, oh, well, we can't find record of it, but it happened. It adds that believability where you go, okay.
And you can put the facts you do have on the made up person, the medium that was there. You'd be like,
Yes.
but there was a medium here that we know, and she did. She said she found something bloodthirsty there.
It's good storytelling.
It is. Very good storytelling. Alex, any final thoughts on the Congelier House legend?
Honestly, it's a good haunted house story. That's it. I don't get me wrong. I enjoyed it. I think it's a really great ghost story. It's a really cool, like, haunted place story. And definitely if you were from the area and you grew up and you're like, oh man, Congelier House, crazy, like, that's a good ghost story. You're gonna be like the kid that's like, I don't want to go there. That's good.
It's kind of like our Axe Murder Hollywood. That's where you dare the other kids to go. Like, you gotta
Exactly.
Go to
You
Ridge
gotta
Avenue.
go. Oh, you gotta go over Ridge Avenue and go see the Congelier House. Like, it doesn't have to be a real place. It doesn't have to even exist anymore. But you say it and people still go to it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
7 Gates of Hell we talked about a couple of years ago.
The gates of hell in Pennsylvania.
There's a single gate,
that is a.
and then if you go through that gate, you might find
You
6
might
others.
find the other 6 that are invisible and only
And,
show up at night,
you know-
and only if you walk through them in the correct order.
Another fantastic ghost story. Same thing there. Tyler, how about you? What kind of final thoughts you have on this legend?
Oh, it's pretty much the same. It's cute. It's adorable. Good story.
I like that. Cute,
Doesn't have
adorable.
enough- It just doesn't have enough bones. I don't know. Like, I mean, I
The
love
story has a lot of bones. There's a lot of decapitated people in the story.
Well, no, yeah, but like just in general, the characters to the fucking drunk doctor. I don't know. It's got the makings, but like when something just doesn't check out, I tend to lose interest.
And
No.
I agree. It's
And
a good
especially,
story.
like, yeah, and like it's not even. It's like, oh, the house was built in 1963. Oh well, record show wasn't built till 67, and the murder that took place in 1871 didn't actually happen until 1874. You know what I mean? Little things. But when you're 2 decades apart, no history of anyone even existing by the same names. You have a fake medium who went there and was like, oh, yeah, this is real haunted. But then a real person went there and there's no record. Nah,
Mhm.
doesn't hold up.
Yeah. I think it's a good story when you're being
Try
told
harder,
it in the
Pittsburgh.
moment. But like, oh, careful! They got the mold man down there. We don't want
They
mold man.
do
coming
have
after-
the mold
We don't
man.
want him coming after us.
Sorry, Moldy Pittsburgh.
I agree. I like it as a story. And that's kind of about it. I don't think you're gonna when you dive into the history, you don't find any of this really. Other than a gas company had an explosion, there was a Congelier family, and other than that, those kinds of details, like the rest of it's just either made up completely or pulled from other sources. Like we don't know where these people came up with this story.
Right.
And I think that's kind of if we at least had from them where their version of this came from,
Exactly.
we'd have something to run with, But there's like snippets of fact that they took and then they just made this
Right.
somehow.
Right. Exactly. Yeah, it's cute. It's
I do like though, Alex, if when you buy the book and read it, let us know if all of this is in there because it's interesting that they would have kept expanding upon their own story in the same story because like any one of these is a fantastic ghost story on its own.
Yes.
The woman that murdered her cheating husband, the evil doctor,
Heads.
these immigrant workers, like all of them are great stories on their own, and like it's if it is like all made up by these two people, it's weird to me that they kept building on to the end of it instead of just leaving
the
it
nuts
at
and
one
bolts of it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's weird.
I agree.
Greedy.
Yeah, they got greedy with it. Is what it feels like.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I agree. I think that does it for the Congelier House. Make sure to like, subscribe, share us all around, and make sure you come back next time for some more spooky action.
Some more Who's Ghost Stories.
And stay in the light.